Ladies, gentlemen of the Batverse, welcome back to a brand new episode in the Batman 2 discussion series. This is kind of overall the Batverse discussion series because we've got some very interesting things to get into after that of the Penguin trailer that released, of where I did a little bit of a reaction initially, an immediate breakdown, but there was some extra things in that trailer which I haven't got a chance to talk about until today's video, which get into Sophia Falcone, the Hangman killer, which is, obviously a reference to comic book storylines such as Dark Victory, of which people have talked about before. With Matt Reeves' Batverse, could we be getting into some Dark Victory stuff? Maybe Dick Grayson, as he's a part of that storyline, and many other interesting things, as well as obviously some Batman 2 questions in this video. If you are brand new to this series, what we do here is we talk, we speculate, we theorize, I bounce off of you guys and what you have to say, going off of some recent news and all kinds of things like that. So without wasting any further time, I just want to say, if you go on to enjoy this video, please consider leaving it a like and maybe consider subscribing, because around 48% of you who come back on a daily basis to watch videos in the past month aren't actually subscribed. So maybe today is the day you subscribe to the channel and stay up to date with all future, anything brand new with regards to Matt Reeves' Batverse. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this video because there's quite a few interesting pointers that I think a lot of people aren't aware of coming out of that Penguin trailer. So first up, we have from Luke Jezik here saying, "Hey Boba, just wanted to let you know that the signs the crowd are holding in the Penguin teaser at the 34-second mark have references to the Hangman from the comic Batman Dark Victory, a sequel to The Long Halloween. It's revealed that Sophia Falcone is the Hangman." And we have Jordan Cooper 1592 basically saying the same thing here, but also saying, with Sophia Falcone being in the Penguin series, could they be hinting at her being the Hangman killer in this universe, and Dark Victory being the main comic inspiration for the second movie? Well, maybe, just maybe. Before we get into more of the Dark Victory inspirations on the Batman Part 2, which is something, I know a lot of people have mentioned in the past for various reasons, even though I think the standout is Dick Grayson. And will Dick Grayson, will there be a Robin in the Batverse? We need to talk about what we saw in the Penguin trailer, and that is true. So what we do know about Sophia Falcone from, God knows how long ago, there was this Illuminati report talking about how Kristen Miliotti's Sophia Falcone would have only recently got out of Arkham Asylum in the events of the Penguin. And as you're seeing on screen, I think I've got the article pulled up. So yeah, she's been recently released from Arkham Asylum, and she served almost a decade's worth of time after she was put away by none other than Oswald Cobblepot. Now, I do think if he was put away by Oswald Cobblepot, or she was put away by Oswald Cobblepot, and the fact that they're seemingly working together, at least maybe the enemy of my enemy is my friend situation, as we see in the trailer, to them toasting, and, there's set photos of them evidently at least being temporary allies, as I keep saying, whoever Oz allies with, even if it's Nadia Maroney, the wife of Salvatore Maroni, it's like, it's going to be a situation where Oz potentially stabs people in the back because he wants to end out on top as the Kingpin. But I do think if it was up to a decade ago, so sometime around 2012, right, when Sophia was put away as the Hangman killer, of which we're about to get into a bit more into the comics there, it probably would have been perhaps to get her out of the way, and maybe Oz, was just doing what he was told. That's something to bear in mind, because maybe Sophia Falcone might not hold it so personally against Oz, because if there's one thing that was made clear in the trailer, is not only that she kind of respects him, she always knew that he had more to him and where other people underestimated him, but the trailer really obviously, to me, gets it across that Sophia, as she says, the family thinks I'm broken. I'm not going to let these old men push me aside again, inferring that she was pushed aside once upon a time. They didn't want her to ascend to potentially a position of power, even if it was around about 10 years ago where she was accused of being the Hangman killer. Now, yes, in the comics, in Dark Victory, most certainly Sophia Falcone was the Hangman killer, but here they seem to be suggesting that what if it was put upon her? Now, I'm not saying that's going to be the case because she evidently got put away for being the Hangman Killer at around 40 seconds in the clip. You can see, I don't know if this is when she's first getting released, right at the beginning of the Penguin series, but, you know, you've got a few signs here. And we know this is present day, by the way, because there are Riddler insignia logos there in the crowd, so this is still after the Batman, probably again when she's getting released right at the beginning. Hang the Hangman. Literally, hang the Hangman, right? There's another one saying, let's get real French. I think that's like a guillotine, maybe a hanging stand. So obviously take off the hangman's head. Falcons equal fascists. And you can see the picture in the middle there is of somebody hanging, possibly Sophia Falcone. So like, they're all saying that she's the Hangman Killer. Like, she got put away for the Hangman killings that took place in Dark Victory that Sophia Falcone did herself. Now, I am very interested to see if they do adapt it that way, or if she just got pushed out of the family all of those years ago. Maybe Oz had a hand to play in that. But as I always say, guys, adaptations don't copy and paste. So all while it seems that, like, hey, they're calling her the Hangman Killer, Boba, why are you questioning this? Sophia Falcone did kill people as the Hangman Killer in the comics, but listen to that dialogue.
I refuse to let these old men push me aside again. So I'm gonna take from them now, and I'm gonna force them to their knees.
So, in the past, well, what happened? She's been spending the past decade in Arkham, so she's referring to, right before she ended up in Arkham, she was pushed out. She was pushed out. How do you push somebody out? Other than to maybe put, like, this crime, or the series of crimes, the serial killings of the Hangman Killer on Sophia Falcone. But I could be wrong. She could have actually gone around murdering people and then gets out, like, a decade later out of Arkham Asylum. But, like, would you really? So I'm wondering if she gets maybe proved to be innocent and maybe somebody framed her to push her out. I know I'm getting into a bit of reachy speculation here, but I don't think you get off, you know, and out of serial killings. And, you know, the Hangman Killer, Sophia Falcone in Dark Victory, ended up killing quite a few people. Like, you would not get out after 10 years legally. Because, you know, clearly she's getting out here, but there's people in the audience who firmly believe she's definitely the Hangman Killer, and they're protesting her release. So, yeah, I don't know why she's getting out, but I wonder if there is a bit more to that theory, and I think there may be, because Sophia Falcone, in all the dialogue we hear from her, is definitely going, like, boss mode, because not only does she probably want to, you know, fill the vacuum of power that her father left behind, but she is further reinvigorated and emboldened by these power-hungry individuals in the Falcone crime syndicate who possibly had her put away all of those years ago because they saw her as a threat. And this time, I mean, just listen to some of the dialogue. She is absolutely not going to let that happen again. And she's going to take from them now and force them to their knees. I don't think you would do that if you were put away for righteous reasons. So I'm really, like, this really makes me quite hyped to see how Matt Reeves' Batverse is going to adapt the Hangman killings and what Sophia has to do with it, if anything at all. And I know some of you may be like, Bo, but I think you are looking into it too much. But don't forget, like, you know, the Hangman killings happen after the long Halloween, and where the holiday killer was already identified as none other than Alberto Falcone. Even though it's a bit open to interpretation, because even though it was Alberto Falcone, there was, you know, the initial killings from other parties, if you will, and then technically Two-Face finished it. And in this universe, you know, Alberto is in this series. There hasn't been a long Halloween storyline that was adapted, unless you want to count, you know, what the Riddler did, and there was influences of that. So as I always say, like, adaptations don't copy and paste. They're kind of injected as an influence. It doesn't mean that they don't do comic accurate things, but clearly through just examples like that, like, there probably hasn't been a holiday killer up until this point. I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't even a holiday killer and Alberto Falcone dies in this series for some other reason, and it has nothing, and he never fulfills his holiday killings. So similar things. They're gonna do Hangman, the Hangman serial killer, but like maybe with a little bit of an interesting twist if I'm onto anything there. And so what could this mean for the Batman 2? well, yeah, they could still adapt other things. So this is where people obviously going off of this question are like, okay, so if they're doing Sophia Falcone, the Hangman killings, could the Dark Victory storyline be seen in other ways bleeding into the Batman Part 2? And that is a possibility, obviously. But I don't think we should hold our breath too much. Again, with me saying adaptations don't copy and paste, that doesn't mean they're going to adapt where in Dark Victory, with Batman, going on this kind of relentless task of trying to figure out what's going on. Through that period of time, he has some difficulties. He becomes, I guess, a bit more even more of a loner Batman, you could say, but then actually ends up recruiting and taking on Dick Grayson. Now, you could say that there's, plot elements like that injected into the Batman Part 2, but this is like an age-old discussion on the channel here. It depends on so many things. A, would Matt Reeves even do Dick Grayson in the Batman trilogy? B, even if he did, would that happen in the second movie? Even though I know many people say it's appropriate for that to happen because I assume he's going to be entering Batman Year 3 since he was in Year 2 in the first movie, and Batman Year 3 is when he would run into Dick Grayson. But, it really does depend on if you can see Matt Reeves with his lens and how, would he make that work here with Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne? Just this whole aesthetic, this whole lens, this whole tone, would they really ground taking on an actual teenager as a Robin? It's just some people can see it. Some people are like having more of a difficulty seeing it, like I am. Although if Matt Reeves wanted to do it, as I've always said, whatever he says, anything goes. And I'd be dead ass just intrigued to see how he adapts that. And the same with anything. Like, clearly, I do shill quite a bit here for Matt Reeves. I'm proud to admit that because I'm in love with his taste, his everything that he has with regards to how he adapts Batman. So I basically am saying that I trust his vision. But for now, do we really see that aspect of Dark Victory happening? That is just such a maybe. It really is. Would be so fascinating, obviously, in one avenue, and then there's another avenue in where we can easily imagine how adaptations don't copy and paste. So all while in our headcanon, let's just say we do get the Batman Part 3 and it ends there. For all we know in this universe, let's say Pattinson's Batman doesn't die in the final movie, and he still doesn't have a Robin. He just might get a Robin at some point in the future. Just kind of like how Christopher Nolan, for example, obviously set up a Robin in the final movie, but Batman in that, like Christian Bale's Batman, was years and years and years and years and years and years into his career, and obviously that was its own adaptations don't copy and paste thing as well. Batman didn't really get a Robin until he gave up being Batman. So who knows what can happen in this universe. I do think after that meeting that James Gunn had with Matt Reeves in early 2023, where they basically said they were doing air traffic control about anything Batman related in their plans for their movies, so they just don't really clash and crash into each other with what they want to do with their own respective, ventures of DCU Batman, kind of separate to that of the Reeves-verse Batman. Robin would have definitely been spoken about, or any Bat Family members, and you have to think, are they reserving any and all Bat Family characters for the DCU? And maybe Matt Reeves was kind of like, hey, you know what? That's fine, because believe it or not, James, I'm doing my own version of Batman. I think is pretty accurate in many ways, but I actually didn't really want to touch Robin. That's fine. You do Dick Grayson in The Brave and the Bold. He might already be at Nightwing. That's fine. You do whoever else. My Pattinson Batman's not really going to go there, even though in your headcanon you could say that eventually he would in movies that we're not going to make. But they could have in that meeting been like, hey, even though we're doing a DCU Batman over here with the Bat Family in The Brave and the Bold, Damian Wayne's coming in, that means Dick Grayson would have already been aged up to Nightwing. If you want to do a younger Dick Grayson, where Pattinson's Batman first finds him, in Dark Victory-inspired influence mode in the second movie, or at least at the end of the second movie, as I've always envisioned it, if it's going to happen, just tease him at the very end with like a flying Grayson's rope snap and then fade to black or something, then you can do that. And Matt Reeves might be like, oh really? Okay, yeah, I was actually gonna find that an interesting thing to be like, how can I make that work here? And take that as a bit of a challenge. So we don't know, but I guarantee they spoke about it. My gut's kind of telling me that any Bat Family stuff is reserved for the DCU, and Matt Reeves is fine with not doing a Bat Family member like Dick Grayson in his 2 or 3 movies that we're going to get. I only say it like that, by the way, because obviously we don't know the box office for the second movie, so we can't guarantee a third. But I don't know. That's just my gut telling me that, right? We could very well be surprised, or I could be, and we might be like, oh shit, they're actually going there? Okay, let's see how this unfolds. You never know, but let me know what you guys think. I know that was quite a bit of a ramble, but it is interesting. So intrigued with the Hangman stuff. Now, from Billy Moore, 7182, they say they're not even telling us this stuff is coming. They're just surprising us. So that's with regards to, obviously, the trailer. And it did just kind of come out of nowhere. And this kind of reminds me to bring up some recent news with that of the Batverse. Obviously, we heard recently Grace Randolph claiming that we're going to get some casting news of the Batman 2 at San Diego Comic-Con. And I gave my thoughts on, entertaining if that could happen, or if it couldn't happen. Long story short, if you missed out me covering that in my DC News Roundup, but I said how technically Matt Reeves has met with actors in the script writing process for the first film. For example, he wrote the Riddler in mind for Paul Dano, literally as he was writing it. And the same thing with Bruce Wayne, Batman, he wrote that character in mind with Pattinson playing the role. So if Grace Randolph is right, you could argue that with Matt Reeves having written the Batman Part 2 script for quite a long amount of time now, maybe there's been some very, very early preliminary talks that may have happened that they could have actually teed up for a San Diego Comic-Con announcement or something like that. But at the same time, Grace Randolph could be wrong. But what else do we have? We could get another Joker trailer and also an official trailer for the Penguin. Because so far we've had like official teasers, but not the kind of traditional official trailer 1 or official trailer 2. But does that translate to, okay, so there is a Batverse presence, but does that mean there's going to be actual Batman 2 announcements? Maybe, but maybe not. I know I kind of keep saying the same thing here, but if we are incredibly lucky, but there could be a video clip of maybe, confirmation of the script being complete and casting being underway or something like that, or dare I say it, actual, maybe a low-key announcement or something. Please don't get too excited though. Obviously there is a Batverse presence with the Penguin. We're probably going to get a new trailer, some badass stuff, maybe some teases from different corners about the series, but we're going to have to wait and see what more we could get at San Diego Comic-Con. But let me know for your biggest hopes, but grounded in reality. Like, what do you realistically think could be coming our way from Comic-Con? Up next from Connor Wook is saying, well, we have to wait quite a while for the Batman Part 2. This is going to be a lot of hours of incredible Reeves-verse story. Can't wait for it to come out, and I 100% believe Batman will either make an appearance or be mentioned quite a bit. It would be cool to hear people talk about him, even if we don't see him. And I agree, man. Like, I don't think people are really absorbing that this is like up to 8 hours of Matt Reeves Batverse content. Now, I say up to 8 hours because you know what they're like. Even though they say 8 one-hour episodes, sometimes it's like 49 minutes, 53 minutes, 56 minutes, even though I think they'll be in the 50s, like, old Game of Thrones kind of HBO episodes. So stuff like that. I think it's going to be Easter eggs galore. Again, getting into the Hangman stuff, getting into Arkham stuff that we're going to see. As for Batman, you guys know my stance on that for now. I do think with regards to another question that we get here from Adam Stephen Bowers 6833, say we get a Batman cameo in the series. Do you think it's more likely to be a cameo as Batman or Bruce Wayne? Now, Adam leans towards Bruce Wayne, especially with everyone calling out for more Wayne after Batman 1, but that's really a toss-up. Also, is it more likely for a Batman Bruce Wayne cameo or a Selina Kyle Catwoman cameo? I think Selina Catwoman. So between Bruce Wayne and Batman, I know what you're saying with people desiring Bruce Wayne more after the first movie, but I don't think he's as applicable to the Penguin series as that of a likelihood of a Batman appearance. Now, sure, you could say, what do you mean, Boba? You could easily have Bruce Wayne, helping out Gotham through Wayne Enterprises, helping the efforts of restoration after the floods. I'm not saying we're not going to get references to that in newspapers and news reports. Absolutely. But in terms of an actual physical appearance from Robert Pattinson, with Kingpin, Penguin, like, rolling around and having this new status quo in Gotham's criminal underworld, what I'm trying to say is, whose position in terms of character would be more relevant, Bruce Wayne or Batman? I think Batman, because him having a similar scene to that of the Batman one, in where he, confronted Oz, wasn't scared. I mean, Batman wouldn't be scared anyway, but he had no quarrels with pushing him up against the glass and cracking it. I know I've said this a few times before, but it would be such a good contrast to the scene that we had in the Batman Part 1 if in the Penguin series there's another scene of Batman coming in, talking to Penguin in his new position of power, and, him learning about this new status quo. Maybe Batman can't really get to him in that moment. Maybe that would be futile anyway, as I've gone on about before. It's not like you can just, take Oscorp and just give him to the GCPD. They might not be able to charge him there and then. It's a lot more complicated to take out the mob and, the crime bosses than just Batman going in there and grabbing them, which is why in the first movie, he could only do that to Carmine Falcone once, the evidence was basically undeniable and going everywhere over the news, if you know what I mean. So all I'm trying to say is an appearance of Batman after the first movie in the Penguin series, learning about the new situation of things in the criminal underworld seems more relevant to me than, if they're going to go through the effort of bringing Robert Pattinson onto set, would you really show Robert Pattinson in his suit as Bruce Wayne being like, okay, yeah, I'm going to cut the ribbon to this new charity ball thing or what? No, I'm not even saying this as like a Batman fanboy. I just genuinely do think there's more story incentive for having a second meeting between Vengeance and Oz. Now, from Hoodie HD, they say, my theory is Mark Strong is playing Basil Carlo and Carmen Ejogo is playing his wife, Eve. And then we have Willy Willy T here saying, I could easily see Eve Carlo being the daughter of Basil, allowing them to keep him as a villain in the past and possibly take up his mantle as Clayface. So this is still something that's up in the air, that the whole Clayface thing, which has been a rumor for a long time. And then we learned that Carmen Ejogo is playing Eve Carlo. Now, you guys know me, I like to reach. And with this one, I really don't know where to land with it, because you could just say, just because her second name is Carlo, it doesn't mean she's related to Basil Carlo, the gold, and they're going to do a Golden Age Clayface thing. But I have to admit, would you really, as, if you're curating the Matt Reeves Batverse, add a character with the second name Carlo, without being aware that fans would be like, oh man, they must be kind of doing that on purpose, even if she is the wife of Basil Carlo, and this is just a nod to Basil maybe appearing in part 2, or, being somewhere else, or something like that, or maybe he's still an actor but hasn't quite gone down to the Clayface path yet. I don't know. Because you could just say Carlo could be a common second name or something like that, but I just don't think they would call her Eve Carlo without knowing people like me are just going to be like, oh. So I know some people are saying, what if it's a gender-flipped Clayface? Maybe you could argue something like that, and this could be, as Matt Reeves says, something that I really always need to stress to you guys, is that he is very adamant about all the rogues being in their infancy, just like Batman is still in his infancy of being a Batman who's still becoming. Granted, it wasn't an origin, he's still, in his infancy. This is case in point, for crying out loud, sure, Batman already put away Joker in Joker Year 1, in Batman Year 1, but the character hasn't even donned himself the name of Joker, even as of the point of the ending of the Batman, right? So we have the unseen Arkham prisoner not being named Joker yet. He's in his infancy. He already got put away during Batman Year 1. He will break out again. Riddler was literally Riddler Day 1, well, Year 1, but kind of, he's only just gone out. So you could argue whatever is going on with Eve Carlo and her brother or her husband, or if she is Clayface, I don't know, it would be in its infancy as well. So this doesn't guarantee that we're going to get a Clayface. It could just be a cool little nod that is meant to make us think, oh, does she have a relation to Basil Carlo? Could this be something that is being saved for part 2 to be expanded on, or even part 3? And for now, it is nothing but a nugget of cool information to ponder about. But yeah, the Mark Strong thing, we've learned that Mark Strong is in the Penguin from his trainer. He had to work out for the role, which was interesting. But we still have no further clues as to who he is. But as for him being Clayface, I mean, it's just, my guess is as good as yours at this point. And no matter what with Clayface, I'd be pretty damn adamant that they still wouldn't make him fantastical. It would be Golden Age Clayface version, rather than, actually being able to manipulate his skin and morph it. That doesn't mean, though, that he wouldn't be this master prosthetics expert in the universe. And where, as I often say, just because they wouldn't do the big blob Clayface, it doesn't mean that Matt Reeves wouldn't walk the line of fantastical. Things that are perhaps not insanely realistic in our world, but it doesn't blur the line to the point of, oh my god, yeah, definitely a clay-faced blob monster isn't realistic. So they could make his prosthetics so good to the point of Mission Impossible face-swapping technology. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty damn sure, unless there's some Black Ops government thing going on, that we don't have technology on that scale, because obviously in the Mission Impossible movies, they actually get the other actor to do the face, and then in the effects, they like swap it out and then they peel the face. You know what I mean? It's obviously done in post, a lot of it. So I'm just saying that they could give that kind of blurring the line to that of the Batverse, because obviously Mission Impossible is still meant to be set in our world, so to speak. It's not mega fantastical, even though it has fantastical things like that. And that's always been my go-to example when entertaining if Matt Reeves would do a Basil Karlo Golden Age Clayface. It would be like a happy medium that would still be borderline unrealistic, but, you know, still insanely kind of like prosthetic, kind of crazy, maybe even with some experimental like putty technology, you know, giving nods to the character in the comic. And he becomes a bit of a killer. And again, I know there's plenty of theories of how he could be working in conjunction with other Rogues Gallery characters, such as Hush or things like that. But I can go down this road for absolutely forever. But yeah, if you guys have anything to expand upon with regards to Carmen Ejogo's character playing Eve Carlo, let me know. I doubt she's the wife of Basil Carlo, to be fair, because there is that scene where you see basically her getting with Penguin. So, I mean, unless she's unfaithful, if you know what I mean. I'm pretty sure she's single. So maybe a sibling of Basil Carlo, unless you want to go with the theories of that they've gender flipped the character to be like somehow this lady goes on to be the Golden Age Clayface. And again, yeah, I don't know. Adaptations don't copy and paste, but I'm willing to bet it's more of a nod at the... And there is family ties there to Basil, but we won't know until we know. Now, Adam Stephen Bowers also says here, what do you think about a timing gap possibly leading to Batman 2 being further in the future, man? I mean, meaning that as Batman 2 is already delayed to 26, it could give them a chance to have it set further after the events of Batman 1 and the Penguin. Would be cool to see Gotham a few years after where the Penguin takes the universe. So I get asked this actually quite a lot, and for me, it's just I wouldn't really want that to happen. And it's not only that, but I don't think it will. I think it will still be, you know, the Batman being set in like basically 2022 as things get into Wednesday, November 6th. I think the Batman Part 2 will take place after the Penguin series, which, you know, takes place in 2022, I guess right at the end of 2022 in November. And Part 2 will take place in 2023. And the reason why that is that, sure, you could say that it would be cool to see where Gotham is after this amount of time later, but I would say that with the psychological roadmap that Matt Reeves wants to establish, or while you could say that, well, you can observe that with a bit of a time jump between Part 1 and Part 2, I would always say that I think a larger time jump of multiple years will be reserved for that of Part 2 to Part 3. Part 3, you can show that psychological roadmap development of Bruce Wayne, and where, you know, we've left him for a bit of time in between movies, and see how that affects him in Part 3, the final movie of the trilogy, if we're obviously lucky enough to get that. But I think the idea and the plan is for Part 1 and Part 2 to be contained with a bit of a smaller arc of time. Because if you already leave like 3 to 4 years between Part 1 and Part 2, I think I would have bigger questions of like, what did he do during those times? Because these are his formative years as Batman, and I know he already went out on quite a big arc in the first movie, and where he had this lesson learned by the end, but I still think it's crucial what we see next, as he gets into year 3, like Dark Victory days, if you will, as we went on earlier. What is the status quo like in Gotham with Penguin now as Kingpin? I don't want to see that 3 to 4 years later. I want to see that as of, you know, Part 2, possibly going into the new year. Because again, obviously, Penguin is taking place as of the end of Batman Part 1, so November, possibly going into December, the winter of Gotham. And I do think at most there will be a few months delay between when Part 2 picks up, but it could take place in January, February, maybe March. Winter lasts till the end of March anyway, so we could still have a wintry Gotham film. And it'd be cool to see what the fallout is of the floods, of the new status quo change, of the criminal element being completely switched up now after the events of the Penguin series, and what that brings in Part 2. Not, 3 years later, and then it's like, what the hell happened in that time? I'm down for that, with, again, part 2 to part 3. Now, William Argent 1139 says, I think that is the asylum. I think they're kind of making it seem like it's Blackgate by switching to Maroni. So I get what you're saying. So when we see, you know, the prison there, if you will, you're thinking that could be Arkham, and the way the trailer cuts it to, obviously, Penguin meeting Salvatore Maroni, it makes it seem like it's Blackgate, but really it could still be an Arkham shot. I still don't think that's the case, because Blackgate Penitentiary is actually located on its own separate island, surrounded by water near the Gotham Bay, whereas Arkham isn't. Now, you could say, again, as I always say, adaptations don't copy and paste, but if I was to make like an educated guess, I think this certainly, like, from everything I know about Blackgate, matches up to Blackgate in the comics, whereas Arkham wouldn't have that kind of surrounding. We did get a clue of Arkham in the Riddler Year One canonical comic, but you could still say, you know, with a lot of franchises, the comics are canon until they kind of end up changing it in the live action whenever that place may appear from comic to live action. But no matter what, Arkham doesn't have this surrounding, and it didn't in the Riddler Year One comic, and it matches Blackgate from everything we know about Blackgate in the source material. So I get what you're saying, but I think this is just, if anything, a compliment to how they made Blackgate look, because it almost looks as dark as Arkham, but it's just not for the criminally insane. But I am looking forward to the day when we see Arkham. And if there's one thing that we know, Arkham is in the Penguin show. So are we going to get a look kind of like this for Arkham as well? Or are we just going to keep jumping to the interior of Arkham? Now, up next, this is a very interesting one, and this goes back to my time of teasing Scarecrow, right? If you guys remember when I did that in a video months and months ago, but Joel did 6038 says, time for far-fetched theories. What if Julian Rush is the alias they used before the release of the series for Jonathan Crane? He is a doctor, has been seen in Arkham, could see Theo Rossi as a deranged scientist obsessed with the fears and anxieties of his patients. What if Victor Aguilar, the character of Renzi Feliz, ends up being a take on Victor Zsasz, a young man getting close to the Penguin, getting involved in violent acts and murders while seeing his whole life destroyed because of the mob and going crazy in the process? What if they do a gender swap Clayface with Eve Carlo, visibly being the love interest of Penguin in the series, or at least close to him? Because of this relationship, she could get disfigured by the mob as retaliation against Oz, just saying. Funny too that the series seemed to involve all of these small characters from the Gotham mob in the comics. Milo Scrappa, Johnny Vitti, and Luca Falcone confirmed, but IMDb also listing Dom Gigante, the Gigantes being in-laws of the Falcones in A Long Halloween, as well as Murty, a hitman for the Falcones. So, to address what you were saying at the beginning there, months and months ago, I teased in a news roundup that I had heard, and I'm telling you, the source being as legit as they come, and you guys know me, I'm not the type of person to flex, oh, I've got sources, and, you know, I've heard, you know, I very rarely do it, and I would like to think that you guys trust me when you trust me, even though I walked it back, because no matter what, I know the source is legit, but things may have changed in between. So let me put it this way. When I heard that Jonathan Crane would be in the Penguin series, I was like, okay, you know, this makes sense as well. We've seen Arkham has to do something with the show. We've had rumors of how Sophia's going to be in Arkham. He could be one of the doctors there. And again, I've seen things that are completely irrefutable in terms of proof of, like, the source that I have. Basically being in the know of Penguin, stuff like that, and that's all I can say for obvious reasons. And I knew that it was Theo Rossi at the time, and that it was Julian Rush, as Jewel did points out here. But the source said to me that, you know, I could only say so much. I couldn't say that it was Theo Rossi, and I couldn't say that the name had been changed to Julian Rush. Even though the ironic thing is that, you know, Dr. Rush is still a bit of a, you know, play on how, you know, Scarecrow, drugs, the whole Rush, Dr. Rush, that could still be a thing that was happening. And so I tried to tease it in a roundabout way, but along the course of time, I had learned that he might not actually be Scarecrow after all. Now, this is still something up in the air, despite the source that I have, in how perhaps originally the character was intended to be Jonathan Crane, Scarecrow, but they kind of changed up the character's name on the call sheet from Scarecrow/Jonathan Crane to Julian Rush. But then they, maybe changed the character. What I'm trying to say here, I know I'm articulating so poorly, is that even though I have a legit source, even they are confused from what they knew. Like, it was one thing once upon a time with regards to Scarecrow being the name used, / Jonathan Crane at least being the name used, but then it was Julian Rush. So they're not even still aware if Theo Rossi's character is meant to be a code name, if you will, for Scarecrow. So not Jonathan Crane, but Julian Rush. And maybe in scenes, they might ADR over the lines. Instead of saying Julian on set, they may now say Jonathan. Or the character was never Jonathan Crane, and they will always just Julian Rush it, Dr. Rush. Even though that would contradict what my source saw, where it did kind of say on paper Jonathan Crane, but then at some point in time, shortly after that, it got changed to Dr. Rush. So do you see what I mean? It's in a bit of an awkward stage in where there's a legitimate source who is kind of also confused. So it's like, where does that lie in terms of things with Theo Rossi's Julian Rush? Maybe there was the original intention to make him Jonathan Crane, but for one reason or another, they're not going to do Scarecrow in the Penguin anymore, because that, with once us getting a Batverse Arkham series, maybe there was plans for that, and since that got scrapped and now there was a DCU Arkham series, but that might not be happening anymore. But do you see what I mean? Like, maybe they're like, you know what, we'll just make him a Julian Rush Doctor, maybe give some nods to Scarecrow, even if he's not actually called Jonathan Crane. Or this is true this whole time, and this is just a code name. We're just going to have to wait and see. But I have always had my eye on Theo Rossi ever since I found that out. And I really hope that it still is the case, that he is Jonathan Crane. I mean, after all, we know that Theo Rossi is a doctor, Dr. Rush, out of all names, working at Arkham. And what if he does have a unique way of treating people? What if he did treat Sophia Falcone, and in a unique way with, early proto-fear toxin, which may be used through not necessarily a developed fear toxin in Scarecrow / Julian Rush's infancy as Jonathan Crane here, but maybe through another form. Which I teased before as well. We're just gonna have to, I know I keep saying it, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. And as for everything else you say, I don't know about Renzi Felice's Victor Aguilera becoming an actual psychopathic Victor Zsasz who kind of, marks his kills on his body. But hey, I haven't seen the series, I don't know the character, but the vibe I'm getting from him in the trailer is, yeah, granted he has an arc and where he's going down a path of, being kind of more corrupted in this world of Oz Cobblepot, and he's going to be rewarded for it because Oz is going to end up as Kingpin, and unless Victor doesn't die, he could be his right-hand man in quite a cool way. But to get to the point of being Victor Zsasz, I don't know about that, but you never know. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end this ramble there. Loved talking about it with you. So as always with the discussion series videos, my eyes are going to be glued to the comment section. So can't wait to see what you have to say. If you got this far in the video, would really appreciate a like on it. Of course, takes 2 seconds of your time. And hey, you're still watching right now, so you may as well consider subscribing for any and all updates on the future of the Batverse. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you people of the Batverse in the next video. Goodbye.